So before my experiment actually became what it was, what it is, I planned on doing essentially a one-man surviving on a spaceship style short film. This didn't go ahead because I ended up doing a slightly different project, but I did make the reactor room, the observatory, and several tubes and walkways for this project. As a result, I was experimenting in this case of how modular design for sets could work. So I drew inspiration off of the Stargate universe series and how they set up the Destiny in the TV series. So the Destiny in the TV series is 5 or 6 rooms of a set, and the rooms are basically changed in small ways to make them look like completely different rooms. So there's about 3 corridors and 2 different rooms. So we have the gate room, which is where the Stargate in the series is located, which has a really big wall that they just lower in front of the Stargate, and then that becomes either a cargo room or something else. And then they have a green screen version of this wall, like a curved version that they just slide the Stargate section out, add in the curved section which has green screen all around it. The stairs just kind of fold around and away from where the camera looks, and so the balcony also is able to be taken away, and it becomes the observation deck from the Destiny. From there, they also, for corridors, to have different variations of the corridors. There are several panels that have several different component looking parts behind it. These component looking parts essentially get folded away when you want to play in corridor. When you have something blow out and explode, you put out and then you add explosions in there. And most of the crew quarters are also able to be repurposed. So they have 3 crew quarters that are able to be repurposed into jail cells, small storage containers, cryo bays, medical bays. They have the central node, essentially, which is the secondary bridge for most of the movie. Gets changed into the ancient chair room for a small bit. It gets changed into the stone room, where they're able to switch bodies with people on Earth for a bit. And this just inspired me myself. So my setup essentially had an observation room that had a corridor that went into an elevator that was actually just a tube that led down to essentially maintenance shafts that I made that had several components in the walls, and these components had special guns next to it designed to damage them whilst I was somewhere else. So they were set on time blocks to precisely calculate how long they had to fire till that block was damaged from full health. Then they would stop firing. This allowed me to set them to damage themselves, record somewhere else, come back to that area as the character, have to repair these components that are broken, and then carry on like nothing happened. These sections were lit quite well, but I could turn off the lights and they would change completely. The other thing I did was in the reactor room, I had several buttons around the reactor on the roof, which were essentially like diagnostic controls for the reactor. So you press buttons, and I set up several blocks to make different whirring sounds or different boom sounds essentially, and different noises that would then, whenever you press the buttons as a character, make that noise and seem like you are tapping away at controls for the reactor. I also then had a shutdown button on the only on all the panels, and then a restart on one side. So the shutdown triggered timer block that set off a sequence that set off an alarm, set off a warning the reactor was shutting down, and then shut down all power on the ship and left the room in red glowing lights like emergency lighting. And then there was a sequence I generally put in was a small sequence on the button panels around the main button to restart everything. They would then just set off a blaring alarm and everything would turn back on quite nicely. And that was about all for that little set. And in the end, I ended up having ambient sound in the background and all this lovely stuff. Unfortunately, it wasn't used in the end, but it was still a research into what I could do with blocks initially, which is what then inspired me to look at what effects I could actually do with blocks for this project.